in theory, a good idea because it will mean that the system is more equitable, but it hasn't panned out that way, has it?
Yeah, I mean, you hear a lot about people defending this idea in theory. You know, the philosophy that underpins universal credit, according to some, is fundamentally sound. But I would really take issue with that because universal credit is not only flawed in terms of the way it's been implemented, it's deeply flawed in terms of its design, and it's also incredibly underfunded. But, you know, talking to the kind of the philosophy that underpins it, of course, there's nothing wrong with tapering people's benefits as they go back into work. But what you've really got to look at is the kind of ideology that underlies this sanctions regime that sits at the heart of the universal credit programme, that effectively blames people who are out of work for their own unemployment and says if you don't turn up to a job centre interview, if you for whatever reason miss your appointment at the job centre, you'll be sanctioned for months on end. And this has been, you know, key to some really tragic cases, like the example of one man who missed an appointment because his father had died and he was attending the funeral and had his benefits cut for 6 months and became homeless.
Would funding be a step in the right direction? Last week, I think it was one of the Sunday papers, Ian Duncan Smith was writing about this £2 million injection to universal credit. I mean, would that help solve the concerns you have?
At the very least, that extra $2 billion, so the $2 billion he's talking about is the $2 billion that's been taken out of universal credit since it was initially implemented. At the very least, that money does need to go back in because at the moment, the current regime is seeing some families lose up to kind of £200 a month, which is a huge amount for people on very low incomes. But, you know, the entire system is really flawed. I think we need to look very hard at our entire welfare system it's kind of almost Victorian, like Dickensian in the way that it places the blame for poverty and for worklessness on the poor themselves, rather than looking at the structure of the economy and trying to help people back into work.
Grace, do you think it's the sort of final nail in the coffin where we had for the first time Esther McVey, the minister, last week saying that there are people that are going to be less well off with this system?
You know, I think this is something that we've known for a long time now. And I think it's all very well saying that, you know, cutting the benefits at the heart of this is, you know, about a contract between, you know, the taxpayer and the state. But, I mean, what we really have to look at, this is contextualised in terms of £12 billion of welfare cuts that have been made since austerity was implemented in 2010. And what we're really seeing is the poorest in society being forced to pay for the mistakes and the kind of irresponsible behaviour of the banks. You know, that's ultimately what led up to austerity. And rather than making sure that the wealthiest, those most able to pay in our society, are, you know, giving back to make sure that the state has the basis to be able to fund our public services, instead we're cutting services to the people that need them most, to actually the people whose spending, whose work, whose, you know, lives drive our economy. And that's a large part of the reason that growth and, you know, wage growth and productivity have been so poor since the financial crisis.